Hello, I am William Jamar Wright,
And I'm Hattie.
and this is our podcast, HattieJo. So it's been a busy month for
It
us.
sure has. October 2019.
October. Yeah, so I guess we can start off with the beginning of the month. It went from September to October.
First there was October 1st, then there was October 2nd. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Well, so the first, I think, big thing that happened in October was on October 4th, I defended my PhD.
Woo! Dr. Hattie Christine Cutcliffe, Dr. Adjacent over here,
Yay!
hanging out.
Yay! So this has been a very, very long time in the making. Several years. I've been in grad school about 8 years. And I'm thrilled to be done. I couldn't have done it without a huge support system. So
Yes.
I'm really thankful for that. But I wouldn't just say the past couple months have been stressful. I feel like the past few years had a lot of very high stress moments, and even the lower stress moments were still kind of high stress in terms of feeling like I'm on a very tight schedule. As you can imagine, most schools don't like it when you take 8 years to graduate.
Well, how long does most schools want you to graduate in?
So for engineering programs, the average is closer to 6 years than it is to 4. So there's a big concept in popular culture that, a PhD degree is a 4-year thing.
Really? That's a...
I would say so. And that may be that things are shifting in today's culture versus maybe 20 years ago. But when I applied to graduate school, I was surprised to learn that the average was about 6 years.
You thought it would take 4?
I thought it was closer to 4.
Huh.
And the rules in the way it's written at Duke University, so Duke University grad school encompasses not just engineering programs, but all programs. So humanities, languages, biology, engineering, everything. And for the engineering specifically, where BME, biomedical engineering, that's my major, is the largest one, so it has the most people involved in it. So the average for the full graduate school is about high 5 year, close to 6 years. So 5.5 to 6 years is the average for the whole graduate school, but for the engineering department in general, it's about 6.8 years. So it's closer to 7.
Yeah.
And I say
So
I graduated. I
it
graduated
wasn't
in
too
8,
bad.
but technically there was a half semester. There was 6 months where I took a leave of absence. So from the very start to my very first semester to my very last semester was 8.5 years. But 6 months of that time was not
school.
Yeah. And the grad school doesn't recognize those leave of absence. It continues as time.
Yeah.
So from the grad school's perspective, it was 8.5 years. So anyway, long story short, there was many reasons for why I was kind of delayed. And so I chose to switch labs in 2016. So in the very beginning of 2016, I took my leave of absence. And when I started school again, that was in August 2016 at a new lab. So I started my project completely over, and it took me just about 3 years, from August 2016 to October 2019, to create the project, do the project, analyze the project, present the project. So, but that full time, when I started over, I was already late on my timeline and in trouble with the grad school. And so there was already a push from the administration to get me to progress. And the whole time, prior to the switch, after the switch, I felt like I was progressing and working a lot. So I never once felt like, I'm working only 40 hours a week. I could kick it up a notch. The entire time I felt like I'm working at my max capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really stressful for me to rectify. I'm behind, I'm late, but yet I'm working at my max amount.
Yeah.
Squeezing every last drop of every day into something productive. This is just really stressful. So that's kind of what I mean with, even on the less stressful times, I was still kind of in this state of everything on my list today needs to happen because I don't have extra backup time.
Yeah.
Right? I don't really have that cushion. So needless to say, I'm very, very happy to be done and
to officially be a doctor
and just no longer have that time pressure, and feels great. Oh, that's so good.
Well, it's funny. Like, I definitely remember some of the like high stress times, and like I always knew
Some
that
were
like,
high stress and some were really high stress.
like I always knew that like you were smart enough to do the work, and like I never felt like, oh, like she's not like, I never felt like you're smart enough to do. I never felt like you weren't smart enough to do the work. I always felt like it was just like, does she want to continue to do this work? Like, is it something that she's interested in doing? And also, like, is it just something where like, like, she's lost, like, just she's gotten into her own head a little bit.
I think that's a fair way.
And to be able, like, getting in your own head and like, kind of overthinking things. That was always kind of my like assessment of the situation in those high stress moments. Because I don't think anything really changed. You just like,
Yeah.
like thinking, going down the rabbit hole of thinking about the million like things that could like come out, the million outcomes that could happen, but like logically, like there was only like some of them that were reasonable. Yeah.
Yes. And I would agree with that. And I think there was kind of two different kinds of stress. When I say high stress, like higher than my normal high stress in that time. One was feeling like I can't figure out the problem. So a lot of people conceive of graduate school as like, oh, you're just doing more classes, more school. Like I've had people ask me when I say, oh, I'm a 6th year grad student, they're like, oh wow, so that must be so nice having all those summers off. I'm like, summers off? And they're like, yeah, because you don't have class in the summer. And I'm like, oh no, like that was the first 2 years. The rest of the time has been much more like a normal job, a couple weeks of vacation, but there's no summer break, there's no spring break. So anyhow,
because you're literally like creating science. Like,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So the project of a PhD is to figure out something new and add something new to the literature that's never been done before or never been discovered before. So that's where it gets really frustrating, and I think the number one key to completing a PhD, kind of like you mentioned, doesn't have a lot to do with how smart you are, but more has to do with how persistent and creative you are and how many times you get back up after you fall down. So what was frustrating for, it's not like a normal homework assignment where the teacher is expecting you to come up with some answer, right? We don't know if an answer exists. We don't know if our techniques can give us an answer. We have many reasons to think one exists, or many reasons to think the tools we have right now can lead us to figure this out, but that's not always the case, and we don't always know. So one thing to kind of illustrate that, one thing that was extremely difficult for me and really frustrating was I was trying to measure mechanical properties of cartilage. So to do that, I used this big machine that compresses the cartilage and all this stuff. It's called mechanical testing. And based on the theoretical mathematical analysis, I was expecting a certain result. But anytime I ran the test, I was not getting that result. And so I thought maybe I was applying the wrong loads, or I didn't have the right bathing solution, or it wasn't the right temperature. So I tried 100 different things, that's not an exaggeration, to change my experiment physically to try to get it to work, still to no avail. And it was like, it would follow what I was expecting, and then at a very particular point in time, something weird would happen. And so then I was like, is there a bubble that's, getting burst at this point in time? Is there something physically that happens to the cartilage? It can only withstand about 30 minutes before something happens. Why is that only happening at this point, not at other points? Okay, let me go back and test rubber. Let me, go to really, really easy things where I know exactly what to expect. And so this whole process took about 8 or 9 months. And finally, what we figured out was there was nothing wrong with my setup. And it was the machine that had a problem. And of course, these are several $100,000 machines that are custom made. So you never expect that that's the problem. And kind of like you said, getting in my own head, I would say that some of my experience in grad school kind of greatly reduced my self-confidence and my sense of self-efficacy. And so never once did I think, oh, I am right, the problem is the other thing, right?
Yeah.
Every single time I'm like, something I'm doing is wrong, or I didn't have the right idea, wasn't creative enough, I didn't analyze the things. There's some reason, and I'm not figuring out what that reason is because of a problem with me. I'm not being observant enough. I'm not being aware or thinking enough of the things I should be observing, you know. So to kind of get to the point where we realized, oh, it's not me, was a huge game changer in my mind, but also really frustrating, right? You can see why everything I'm trying isn't working.
Yes.
When you do that for almost a year and your whole project depends on this, it's not like you can get other things done while you're still figuring this out. Like, this is step 1. If step 1 can't happen, step 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 can't happen, and I gotta get all that done in the, a year and a half. Oh my god, I'm spending all, so that was one type of stress. But the second type of stress was more what I think you were describing, which is where I had things done. I finally got a date set for my defense, which is the final examination, and it consists of roughly an hour-long presentation where I discuss my entire experiment, the motivation, how it fits into the rest of the literature, the experimental setup, the findings, and the implications of those findings, to my committee, which consists of 5 university professors, all with PhDs in with experience directly related to my thesis. It's open to the public. Anyone can come.
Yeah, I was there.
My best friend Lauren came. Tons of friends from labs came. So that was really, really nice to see all the support from friends. But anyhow, during this, both the committee members can critique me, people in the audience can critique me. There's an open session where I speak with everyone and everyone can ask questions. But then there's a closed session where the audience leaves and it's just me and my 5 committee members, and they grill me with more questions. So I'm obviously very nervous about this, and I have been anxiously trying to get to this point. And so I've been going, having this timeline, working hard to make sure I meet this timeline, right? So because my mechanical testing took so long to kind of figure out, there was a solid 2 or 3 months where I was running 2 mechanical tests a day. So I'd have to get in right at 8:30 to start things, change my sample at about 3:30, and then I'd come home, but then have to leave again at about 10:30, 10:45 to go clean things up, and then I'd be back home around 11:30, 11:45. So I'm doing all that in addition to all the other work and coaching gymnastics and helping Amaje, doing stuff.
Because during this whole time, like, Amaje was here with us. So.
Yeah, which I loved having him. That was so great. So anyhow, I'm just really giving every last drop of my energy, I guess. And so I finally get to this point where I get a date set for my committee, and it's like, you're right, I kind of got way too in my own head, and just like extreme anxiousness. I was having panic attacks and paranoia about my data, and really concerned about my data. I'd talk with my advisor. He'd be like, this is not a problem, right? You're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, like, the ship is sinking. You moving things around is not going to make a difference. And what he was trying to say was, my data tells a certain story, and some small changes here and there to the data is not changing the story. But I was freaking out about, like, oh my god, changing this, so he was trying to reassure me that, like, these are minutia, and the whole picture is not a big deal, and, he tells me this, and then
I remember this, and, like, it all kind of, like, this is around the Fire Fest festival time.
Yeah.
So we watched the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix, and, like, I was just like,
so can you explain what the Fire Fest is for anyone?
Well, it's basically just like this festival that, like, these people try to like advertise and say, hey, like, we're putting on this music festival, like, all you millennials should come down and,
it's
like,
the best
watch
party
out
in an island in the Bahamas.
Like, advertise it all on, like, Instagram, and, like, got these models to say, like, they were, like,
gonna be there.
And so basically the whole festival was a sham, and none of it happened. It was just a free-for-all, like, horrible, like, just a horrible situation. So you should go watch it on, like, Go watch it on Netflix.
So it's classically thought of as a big scam, right? They're saying they're selling you this amazing experience for this high amount of money, but what do you get out of it? Like, not even a cot to sleep on if you got unlucky. And
yeah, I would. And I would even say it's a scam, because I feel like a scam, the people know, like, they're trying to, like, get you to give them money.
They're trying to deceive
knowing
you, yes.
that, like, these people actually, like,
they were trying to put on a festival.
They were trying to put on a festival, and
job.
they just didn't know, like, what they were doing or how
yes.
to do it.
Right.
And so all these people had a horrible, like, experience.
Yes.
And so that kind of,
like, got into my head.
Intensified your, like, just...
Yeah, and same with I always read it in my mind as Theranos, but with Elizabeth Holmes and having that test that you give a drop of blood and it can diagnose a whole bunch of different diseases, and she got millions of dollars of investor money to create this product and to have this company, but it turns out they were fabricating a lot of their data. Their machine doesn't do any of this. Just super.
Did not know.
Yeah, and so I just had in my mind, like, oh my god, all these little changes, like, everything is crazy. And Lou, my advisor, is like, deck chairs on the Titanic, like, everyone's going down. Like, no matter what you do, your data tells one story, and that actually is a strength of the data, right? Whether I look at it from this perspective or that perspective, I'm getting the same overall trends and overall outcome. I think that's actually a strength. But at the time, right, I'm extremely stressed. I finally have a date, so now, excuse my language, shit got real, right? And I'm like, oh my god, this thing that I've been working for 7.5, 8 years is finally going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I need it to go well, right? And so a lot of my anxiety just led me down this rabbit hole. And multiple occasions I met with my advisor being like, I don't feel good about this, I don't feel right about this, and he'd be like, we've gone through it many times, it's been checked over by a radiologist with 30 years experience reading MRI scans. Like, you mean to tell me you think your concerns are, more informed than his 30 years experience? I'm like, well, no, you're right, like, all this stuff. And then it'd be 2 weeks later and I'd be like, I'm still not feeling good about this. And thanks, Lou, for having so much patience. But I'm not exaggerating when I say I was having panic attacks. There'd be nights where I maybe slept 30 minutes. I'm in the bed, my heart is racing, I feel like I can't breathe for days on end, just in, like, this heightened state of just this feeling of something awful is going to happen, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of the feeling. There's nothing I can do to protect myself from this awful thing that's about to happen. Just this sense of impending doom. And the first panic attack I had was the most severe, and I get now why people describe panic attacks as you feel like you're dying or you feel like you're having a heart attack. Like, I never thought the term, oh, my heart was beating out of my chest, was an accurate description, right? But it really feels like your rib cage is about to explode, like you can't keep your heart in, like you can't breathe, like it feels like some alien is about to pop out of your chest. It's horrible. So needless to say, it was a rough time.
Yeah.
But we made it through. So.
Yeah, and you did a really good job at your presentation.
Thank you.
And, like, it's very informative. Like, everyone, like, enjoyed it. Like, it was interesting to see that, like, just based off the support that Lou gave, and, like, scheduling lab meetings to, like, for you to go over your presentation
and practice
practice the presentation, like, that really prepared you to, like, go into the presentation. And, like, even, like, I would say in the past, like, a little thing, like, we showed up and there was another group in
the room that I had reserved,
and, like, I would say in the past I would have thought that would have, like, sent you all into, like, a little tizzy. You're just been like, you're not,
you're
like,
right.
just like, it would have, because it just didn't go as planned. But I think just based off the support of Lou, you were able to, like, manage that whole situation, and it got, like, it definitely, it was, because I'm sure you'll talk about this, but, like, your defense date got moved up.
Oh yeah, that was stressful too.
And like, getting moved up 2 weeks, like,
2 weeks is a long period of time in the terms of preparation for it. Like, it feels like a long time to a student, but I had a lot of people say to me, 2 weeks is a drop in the bucket compared to the 8 years you've been a grad student, right? Like, what you know, this extra 2 weeks isn't gonna make a difference. And in hindsight, they were right, but it really feels at the time stressful. And part of it is also, I had in my mind that it's gonna be on day A, and there's rules with the grad school of, okay, 2 weeks ahead of day A, you need to do this. 2 weeks ahead of day A, you need to do that. And so I had made this plan to make sure I had a manageable amount of time to do all those things. So if the date gets moved up 2 weeks, so does a lot of that other stuff. Mm-hmm. And what was stressful was not necessarily that it got moved up 2 weeks, but that I got notification of it getting moved up 2 weeks by only 2 weeks from where it was going to be moved to. So I went from the concept of, okay, I have a month to do this presentation, and I have 2 weeks before all this stuff is due, to, oh God, I have a day before all this stuff is due. Mm-hmm. But thankfully, like you mentioned, I had a great amount of support from my advisor and the rest of my lab. So I kind of felt like March, when I got it scheduled for the middle of October, my defense, and when I was having severe anxiety, that was kind of the peak, and everything since then was kind of decreasing in stress. So once Lou and I finally got to the point where I felt good about my data, and it was like, okay, that's a done deal, we're moving on to writing the defense, finishing analyzing a few things, but writing the thesis, my dissertation, and preparing my talk, I felt like things got a lot better. So I wrote furiously over the summer, and that turned out to work really well, because I was done with my defense my dissertation, with several months before my defense. So then I could focus on just creating my presentation and studying, because I could be asked a million different things, and I should have some concept of how to answer those million different things. So I did feel there was a bunch of studying I needed to do, but over the 1.5, 2 years that I'd been preparing for this, I had made a bunch of note sheets on different topics, so that when it got to time for studying, I wasn't overwhelmed with, I have to know all this stuff and where can I find it. It was like, okay, here's my cartilage biology notes, and it's 20 pages of stuff I've accumulated from doing reading over 2 years.
Yeah.
And so it's all in one spot, and easily accessible, right? And that really helped me when I was writing my dissertation too, because I was like, okay, for the past 2 years, every time I come across a study that does mechanical properties of cartilage, I put it in this big table, right? And I have the methods they use, the animal, the type of cartilage was, the main findings, what was interesting about the study, right? Major limitations, major benefits of this study. And so when I go to write my thing, I'm like, oh, I need to compare my data to other data. Oh, look, I already have this 35 studies right here. Which ones are most relevant? Oh, these 5, because they all look at this animal too. Great, right? And so it just made things so much easier. And for the studying, it made it so much easier because it all was already assembled. Yeah. I just had to study that stuff. So it was really nice, actually, to have about 2 months, well, it started as 2.5 months, but due to things getting moved up, about 2 months of just preparing the talk. So that allowed me to have a draft of a talk, and then for 3 lab meetings, 3 weeks before my defense, I gave a practice to my whole lab. And so that was really great because they asked a bunch of hard questions. Yeah. And so I could kind of start thinking about types of questions I might be asked. And I also made a big document. Every question that I was asked in a practice, I wrote into this document, and then I wrote up an answer that I would give. Mm-hmm. Most of the time in the practice, I was able to give a decent answer, but there were some questions that I wasn't satisfied with my answer. And
you want to say a little bit more?
Yeah, or wanted to just think about it a little bit more. And in that document, I also wrote up some questions that I originated, right? So nobody asked it to me in a practice, but I thought I might be asked it, and came up with a response. And so I felt really prepared going into the defense. Yeah. And kind of like you said, based on how stressed I was when the things got moved up, I would have, and knowing myself, I would have also thought, like, oh, the room is booked until I'm supposed to start. That would throw me into a tizzy, right? Or one of my committee members was Skyping in from Germany, and we couldn't get it to work at first, and that would have thrown me into a tizzy. But I was kind of at the point where it was like, it's sink or swim, man. Like, the only way out of this is through, and I'm just gonna make it happen. Like, whatever happens is fine. But yeah, it was actually kind of stressful with this rescheduling thing. So it was originally scheduled for October 17th, and then one of my committee members, about 3 weeks before, said, "Oh, there's a chance I may not be able to make it that day. We might need to reschedule." And I'm like, "Oh, geez, well, if we need to reschedule, I need to figure that out now because
we gotta have a date."
Yeah, we gotta have a date, and also part of the thing was when I was scheduling originally back in March, no one was free at the end of October or the beginning of November, which is the last day you can defend. And so October 17th was already kind of the latest it could be. So I didn't have in my head of, oh, we could reschedule to later. It was like the only option is pushing it forward. So then I had to wait to figure out whether or not this committee member was actually going to need to reschedule. And by the time I did figure that out, again, I only had a small period of windows of it could be scheduled to this date and I could still meet the 2 weeks ahead deadline. So then we got it rescheduled. Great, no problem. It's going to be October 4th, no big deal. And then a week before October 4th, a different committee member was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I've had to make an emergency trip to Germany, and I'll be in Germany during your defense. Hopefully that's okay." And it did end up being okay, but you need permission from the graduate school to have someone remote in. And normally there's forms associated and all this, and every other dealing with the graduate school I've had has been a lengthy process, right? I submit the form, takes them a couple months to get back to me. They tell me that, whatever reason I need to do something else. I'm like, why wasn't this clear beforehand, right? So it just is this big long process, but thankfully the grad school came through for me and I was like, oh my God, my defense is scheduled in like a week and now I need to have a remote participant. I need the dean's permission for this and, please help with this process. And within like 30 minutes, I had the dean's permission, I had notification of it, everything was good to go. And I was just like, oh, thank you.
Well, I think that like goes to like Duke University and like the graduate school program, wanting like the graduate students to like have an enjoyable experience and also graduate.
Yes.
Because it definitely doesn't look good when you have these graduate school students and for whatever reasons, like they're not graduating on time or like the average upon the schedule that they're supposed to do. But like that is complicated even more by the fact that like a professor is not like they say they're available and then like the professor is involved.
Right. Yeah, that had nothing to do with me, and it's not that there's any issue. Like this is how life goes, right? Yeah. So yeah, I was very pleased with that whole scenario. So then I was just preparing to make sure the Skype worked, and we got it working fine. Everything was great. I felt very good about my defense, and yeah. So then what happened is I had before my defense, I had invited my parents down to celebrate with me the weekend of my original scheduled defense. So my mom and stepdad Scott had bought tickets for that weekend. My dad hadn't yet bought tickets, so when it got rescheduled, it was actually kind of perfect, and he chose to come the weekend of my actual defense because Mom and Scott couldn't change their flights on such.
I think your mom.
Well, it was my mom had the work thing. Her boss was gone that weekend, and it was like the one weekend her boss was like, we can't both be out. So anyway, they chose not to reschedule their flights. I guess that's a better way to say it. So I'm really excited. I don't get to spend all that much time with my dad, especially not one-on-one time with my dad. So I was thrilled. It was going to be great. My dad was coming. So I did my defense. We went to an awesome lunch to celebrate.
With the old grub?
Yeah, old grub. My dad comes out, or he says he's coming, right? And he says he has a surprise for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness. I have no needs. Like, what could this surprise be? And I was like, oh my gosh, he's bringing someone that I hadn't known about. And I thought at first it was my little brother Jeffrey, because that made sense to me that he could come on kind of short notice, and he lives in Colorado with my dad, so it all made sense. But I kind of had a sneaking, so that was my first guess, but in the back of my mind I was like, maybe it's not Jeffrey. And so my lab had prepared for me a celebration at Cloud's Brewery later that afternoon. So my dad said he'd meet us at Clouds Brewery.
Yeah.
And so we're at the celebration, having a good time. My dad shows up with my Uncle Neil.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a surprise. My Uncle Neil lives in California. I was the little flower girl in his wedding. He's my dad's most immediate younger brother. So my dad has several siblings, but my dad's second oldest and Uncle Neil is third oldest. He's hilarious. Don't get to spend as much time as I would like to with him either. So this was a huge treat. I was overwhelmed, like totally floored, so excited. And then my dad, I see my Uncle Neil mentioning to my dad, like pointing at his watch and all this stuff. And my dad's like, oh, we need to go check into the hotel, but then we want to meet up with you later.
Yeah.
Right? So the celebration with my lab and everything was over, and we were going to go to dinner later. I'm like, we need to drop this stuff off at the hotel. Like, okay, whatever. I'm exhausted, mentally exhausted. I'm just along for the ride. So then we go to dinner, and who shows up but my Uncle Blake? Oh my goodness! So Uncle Blake is the oldest. So it's Uncle Blake, my dad Brent, and Uncle Neil, and they're all about a year and a half apart from each other, so they're very close in age. Oh, and I love my Uncle Blake too. Don't get to see him as much as I'd like to. Although we did get to see him at the most recent Cutcliffe family reunion at Rob and Sarah's house.
Yeah, it was about a year ago when Majo was here.
Yeah, it was.
We all went up to Chicago to where Rob and Sarah live.
Yeah.
And we were there, and he came down for the Cutcliffe reunion.
Yeah, he lives in Canada, so just outside of Toronto. Drivable distance to Rob's house in Chicago, so that's how he was able to attend. But, oh my goodness, the best.
Yeah,
it was the best surprise ever, and for my dear old dad to have pulled it off, oh.
Yeah, so it was amazing. Like he emailed me on that Sunday evening. He was just like, "Hey, I am bringing like Hattie's uncles into town with me, so we're gonna get a car, we're gonna get a hotel, so you guys don't need to worry about us." So I was like, "Cool." And so Hattie
and I was totally unbeknownst. So the original plan was Dad was going to come. He was going to stay at our place because we have an extra room. And he did tell me that he was renting a car, and I thought that was so weird because every other time he's come, he's just borrowed my car if he needed a car, or I've provided transportation to pick him up at the airport. Plus, there's things like Uber. So if he's expecting to need transportation without us, it's much cheaper to pay for $20 or $30 Uber ride once than it is to rent a vehicle for 3 or 4 days. So I did, and we talked about that in the car, that I thought that was weird.
Yeah, you thought he just had like something else going on here.
Yes, because he's also done that in the past, right? He's come to town for tennis tournaments or badminton tournaments, and he has lots of friends here that do those things. So it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. He can spend some quality time with me, but he can also do these other things with his other interests. So I thought it was weird, but not that much because, in the past he's done similar things. I just thought that if that was the case, he would have normally told me about, but not always, right? So also I'm busy preparing for my defense.
It's your defense day. So
right, so I noticed this, but I'm not spending too much mental energy, right? So anyway, he also let slip after my defense that he had a surprise, and that's how I got clued into he was bringing someone. But I still didn't know who it was, nor did I know there was going to be 2 surprises. So anyway, we just had a fantastic weekend. We went to some restaurants, and we went to the football game, which was really great. That was the
It was a very entertaining football game. Oh my God. We got down. I was like, maybe we should leave.
Yeah, we were down in like the first quarter by, it was 27-3 or something.
Yeah, it was
we were down by a lot.
A lot to a little. But we came all the way back. Like, we took the lead in like the final minute and a half in the 4th quarter. It was a Duke home game against Pitt. And I'm like, oh my God, like we're going to win this. Like the defense has been playing great.
And I will say we took the lead, but then there was that call that reversed it.
Yeah, but that was on the 2-point conversion.
Oh, that was on 2-point conversion.
And we tied it up.
Yeah.
The 2-point conversion would have tied it up, but they reversed it. And then we came back and later took the lead on the running back pass up the middle.
So it was a really exciting game.
It's a really
Unfortunately,
exciting
we
game.
didn't end
Pull
up
it
with
out.
the win, but it was
entertained. We were entertained.
So entertained. Great atmosphere. So much fun. And of course, Coach Cutcliffe, the football coach, is a relative of my dad and his two brothers. So they were thrilled the whole time. We also got to watch my cousin, who plays football in Canada at college.
Yeah.
He's currently injured, but we got to watch his team and see him on the sideline. We got to watch some gymnastics. So mostly we had a weekend filled with sports, and even more than that, just chatting back and forth with each other. We toured Duke a little bit, but the highlight of the weekend was definitely just spending time with my dad and uncles and you, and just listening to all their stories.
Yeah, it was so
hilarious.
Neat. It was my first time meeting your Uncle Neil.
And not Uncle Blake.
Yeah, I had met Uncle Blake before. But Neil, like, it was great meeting him, and just to see kind of how they all play off of each other. And like, they're also very like intelligent, but just in different ways, in the way they see things. And it's just so interesting. Like, we can be talking about like a manufacturer and like how they're entering into the marketplace. And then your Uncle Blake is thinking like, well, the manufacturers and like how they're gonna build this, like how are they gonna structure it. And your dad is thinking about like the marketplace and like how do they go,
how to get competitive in the market, and how can they get ahead,
make a bunch of money. And then your Uncle Neil is like kind of pushing back on your dad and like the strategy and like what's the best strategy to go about it. And like bringing in all of these books and stuff that he's reading. So it's just a very like interesting dynamic of like their sibling.
Right, their sibling status. And it's so funny to me because they're clearly so close.
Yes.
And they're clearly all cut from the same cloth. Like, you can just listen to them and see them for 5 minutes and be like, these guys are all have very specific points of view on very specific things. But at the same time, they're also really diverse in a lot of their viewpoints and opinions, and ways they think about things and see the world. So it's very entertaining to me to see them interact that way, especially as I grow into more of an adult. Because in the past, when I've been able to interact with them and observe all of them together, I've been a child. And it's just great. Super entertaining. So much fun. They're excellent people. I love them so much. So that was a really fun weekend.
Yeah.
So then, you had discussed this with me a week or two before my earlier defense date.
Yeah.
So the defense got rescheduled to October 4th. So from the 17th to the 4th. And you had mentioned, like, probably 2 weeks right when it was getting rescheduled. Like, hey, we should spend some time to celebrate this, just you and me. And let's have a treat yourself day. So can you talk a little bit about what went into your thoughts for that?
Well, it was just a treat yourself day. Like, you had done a lot of work to reach like this point in your life and become officially a doctor. It was like, it'd be nice to just do like a little treat yourself day from Parks and Rec. They gave us a little, and we had watched that together.
Yeah, watched it together.
So it was nice to kind of do a little treat yourself day. So
and the actress who plays Donna went to Duke. She's a Duke alum.
Oh, did not know this.
Yeah. Anyway, the Duke connection.
So we did.
So treat yourself day in the show Parks and Rec. 2 of the characters every year they have a date with each other. They're not romantically involved. They're just friends, but where it's a treat yourself day. So they go shopping and they buy whatever they want. They go to the spa. They do all the things. They eat all the cheesecake. They just treat themselves. And it's their one day a year they can splurge and they can just live in luxury, right? So it's kind of a special thing that they both look forward to, and it's a recurring theme in the show. So it's a funny joke. So when you were like, let's have a treat yourself day, I knew exactly what you were intending.
Yeah, so I was just like, you know what, like, let's have a treat yourself day. I'm going to take Hattie, going to do a manicure and pedicure, and then we're going to go get a massage. But I also, like, had in my mind, like, so for this entire year, I've been kind of thinking about proposing and being engaged to Hattie. So it was definitely like a year-long process. of like planning it out. I remember talking.
This is the insider scoop I love to hear.
I remember talking to my best friend over at New Year's.
Patrick. At New Year's.
Yeah, I was at New Year's, and I was like, at this time next year, we will be engaged. I didn't know exactly when it would happen, but I just knew like at some point this year we would be engaged. And then so it kind of worked out.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
So it kind of worked out. Like my boys and I were going out to Oregon for a guy's reunion
Their yearly guy trip.
Yeah, and I had talked to you about this, and you're like, you know, it's important that you talk to my mom and ask like for her blessing in person. So I was like, all right. Well, your mom came here to visit us for a gymnastics meet in Greensboro, and I was like, hey Kim.
In March, right about the time that my anxiety went through the roof.
I was like, hey Kim, I'm gonna be out in like the summer in Colorado. Like, I would love to grab dinner with you guys. And so she was like, sure. Like, I'll see if I can get the boys together, and we'll all go out to dinner. And
so was that like a response you were expecting, or were you like, ooh, all the boys are gonna be at dinner?
Well, I honestly was just expecting like your mom and Scott to be there.
Okay.
But your mom was like, well, I'll get everyone
so,
together.
But I guess what I'm saying is, when you heard that feedback, did that make you apprehensive, or were you like, I can roll with this, no big deal?
I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, that's just your mom doing
It is just my mom doing mom things.
So
he knows our family so well.
So I like talked to your mom. She was cool with it, and like you could tell, like your mom kind of picked up, like, hey, like he's coming out alone. He's talking to me. Yeah, like this is not like
he has never once said Hattie and I.
Yeah. So I emailed your dad, and I'm like, hey, Brett, like I'm gonna be in Colorado, and I gave him kind of two-hour block windows that I was free.
Oh,
One was
so
in the afternoon.
You were gonna be in Colorado because you were flying from a conference in Atlanta to Oregon.
Well, originally I was just flying. I was going out to the boys' weekend. And I was gonna go a day earlier and stop in Colorado.
Gotcha. Which makes sense. Like, you're flying across that way anyway. So it was a perfect opportunity. Sorry to cut you off. So you email my dad with two options.
Yeah, I just emailed him and said, hey, I'd like to grab coffee. Gave him kind of two options.
And again, I'm not CC'd on this email, right? No. It's not Hattie and I will be in town. It's just I will be in town.
Yes, I would love to grab coffee with you. So, like, probably like 2 weeks later, you and your dad are talking on the phone.
Yes, so I love to send greeting cards, and I had sent him a Father's Day card. And so he and I don't get to talk on the phone all that frequently, so when we do, we normally have an extended conversation and catch up on all the things. So he had called me to say thanks for the Father's Day card, and we were having a long conversation. And he says to me, as we're talking, he's like, you know, I'm really excited for Will's visit out here in July. I'm like, oh, Will's coming out there. What visit out there in July?
Well, and he said like you and I going, you like Hattie and Will. I'm looking forward to you and Will coming out.
No, July. He didn't. He said, I'm looking forward to Will's visit in July.
Oh, I thought he said that like both of us, and then you were like,
oh, maybe he told that to you, but I have a distinct memory of him saying, I'm looking forward to Will's visit in July. Oh. And I remember saying, what visit in July? And he said to me, oh, you know, he's coming out. I have it penciled in my calendar and everything. Right? So he knew that this was like, it's not just a, let's try to get together. It was like a definitive time, put it in the calendar, do not forget about this. He also knew that it was just you coming, right? He didn't say, I can't wait to see you in July, right? And so I'm like, oh, I didn't know he was coming in July. And then it's dead silence. And then my dad goes, oh. And the way he said it, I know the exact facial expression he made. I'm sure he was just like, oh. Like, I know that's what his face looked like when he said this. Maybe I shouldn't have spilled the beans. Like, that's the cool thing he said. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then, so my sister-in-law, Sarah, has a ton of friends who live in Colorado. And so Sarah was actually later that month, I think at the end of June, coming to Colorado to visit some of her friends. And Sarah is an extremely social person, very loving on all of her family members. So she had also said, Brent, I'm going to be in Colorado. just me, not Rob, but let's get together. So Dad then tried to cover it up by being like, oh, well, Sarah's coming, like just Sarah, and it's just a friendly visit, and, this happens all the time, and like, so he clearly got the message at that point, and then was trying to backpedal and make it seem like
you didn't say anything. Yeah. Well, and then like you came and asked me, and I was like,
so then
I'm gonna be flying through Colorado, and I have a layover, and
because I just couldn't hold it in. I got off the phone with my dad, and I was like, maybe I have something interesting to ask you about. And I think you were playing games or something, like video games, or maybe reading a book.
Yeah, I was upstairs in the bathroom. I think I was brushing my teeth.
Yeah, we were up there talking, but I was like, so, my dad says you're coming to Colorado in a month. And I said it kind of like that, like I just couldn't contain my excitement. And so then...
Yeah, so that kind of, like, I said I had a layover, and so, like, I ended up going to a conference earlier that week, and then flying out to Colorado.
Which I will say that was pretty effective, because normally when we buy tickets, we buy them on Southwest, and I have a credit card. So we buy all the flights on Southwest, and if it's just for you, then you reimburse me, whatever. So you had bought your tickets to Oregon, from North Carolina to Oregon, on my credit card. And I remember randomly you asking me, how do I change a flight on Southwest? And I thought that was really weird, because I knew that your Oregon trip wasn't getting changed. Yeah. And I also knew that normally I take care of those things. So I was like, I wonder what he's changing this for. But it was very convenient that you then had the flight in Atlanta for your conference in Atlanta, because I did notice that being weird, but in my mind I just rectified it as, it's probably because of the Atlanta thing.
Yeah. So,
And because you had told me you were going straight from your conference in Atlanta to the Oregon. Yeah. So that was like, okay, no big deal. And when I had this conversation with you about, you're stopping in Colorado, I didn't know this. Like, you had this deer in the headlight look on your face. But then you very quickly were like, I have this layover, da-da-da-da-da. And so I also thought, like, well, given the conversation my dad just had, this might be what I think it might be. But if he thinks it's just a layover, it's probably not, because he does know he needs to talk with my mom as well. So I had some suspicions. You knew. But it wasn't 100%.
You knew. Like, nothing's 100%. You knew. Like, you knew. So, it's not a big deal. Like, it's not, like, it was a situation where, like, you knew. Like, and I would say based on the fact that, like...
wait till our kids do this. Or
like, you were throwing hits out left and right, like Ali in the Holyfield fight. Like, you were just throwing haymakers. And, so, like...
Just
it was
doing my part.
Yeah, so I told Tyler about going to Colorado, and then once I got out to Oregon, I told everyone, like, hey, like, this is kind of happening, and like, it'll happen like after your defense. And at this point, your defense hadn't been moved up.
Right, and that was something that I really did appreciate. So I don't like to boss you around, but I had said, I feel like we're trending towards this milestone, but I really don't want to be engaged before my defense, because that'll just be too many things for me to think about. Like, I know myself, and when I get excited about things, I want to plan them. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to make sure that all of my mental energy was available for my defense. And likewise, my mom has similar aspects to me, and I know that she would be all excited and wanting to plan stuff, and I didn't want, even if I could not plan anything on my end, I can't control other people, right? And so I didn't want to, again, just introduce things that might distract my energy and effort from my defense. So I really appreciate you waiting. So anyhow, so now we get back to this treat yourself day, and we had October 4th was my defense, and we knew that you knew that my dad was coming and my uncles were coming. We also had 2 weekends later, the original defense day, where my mom and Scott were coming, and that had been planned for a long time. So you said to me, how about that weekend in the middle? That seems like a good time that just you and I can have this nice treat yourself day. So that was kind of the plan. Yeah, so we had a great day. Yeah, we did have a great day. We went over to... Took a half day at work. Yeah, and you got your nails and
feet done.
Well, we both got manicures and pedicures. I
got the
polish
basic
on mine.
treatment of just the mani and pedi, no polish.
Yeah, but you got the wine, you got the relaxing back massage thing.
And then we went over to get a massage over here in Durham and got a couples massage. It's very nice and relaxing. Very nice.
Oh, so one other thing I have to say that led me to feel like maybe this is the day was when, actually two other things. So the first thing was when you were planning this, so to your credit, you planned the whole thing. I didn't have to say, how about this time? How about this place? Like, you just took charge and did everything. But you did ask me, would you like a manicure or a pedicure? And I remember saying, well, if I have to choose one, I think I prefer a pedicure because they normally last a little longer and are a little more relaxing to me. And you said something like, oh, well, it's only $15 more for a manicure, or something along those lines. And so I remember being like, well, I could do both, thinking like, if he's really wanting me to have my fingernails done.
Oh, I was only doing that because I didn't know if you preferred only to do one. And if you were thinking of cost as an issue,
which I often do.
Yeah,
so
it was.
You were just trying to treat me.
That had nothing to do with.
Okay, interesting.
And also, she woke up that Friday morning and did her hair to go to work.
So I had a second piece of evidence. I never do my hair for work unless it's my defense. So my second piece of evidence was you had planned this treat yourself day. I knew it was coming. I knew which day it was. But at first it was just the mani-pedis and couples massage. And then a few days later you said to me, so feel free to say no, but I was thinking we could go for a walk in the gardens as part of our couples massage as part of our treat yourself day, and we could come back here and get Amelia. And then I'm thinking to myself, a walk in the gardens with Amelia, my beloved dog. This sounds pretty romantic. And so I remember being oh, it doesn't matter to me, whatever you want, but I think that sounds good. To try to not let on.
Yeah.
Right? But so I had in my mind, this might be the day, and you're absolutely right. I totally blew dry my hair the night before. I was straightening it the morning of, and you even asked me, are you doing your hair? And I was like, well, yeah, I want it to look nice for tomorrow. Because so homecoming was on Saturday. So the treat yourself day was Friday. Homecoming was on Saturday. I was going to see a bunch of friends. We had all sorts of stuff planned. Mm-hmm. And we had a wedding to go to on Sunday. Yeah. So I tried to play it off as if I do my hair now, I don't have to do it tomorrow. But clearly you were wise down to that. I have one other thing to say. So I had all these hints, but in the back of my mind, I was he still hasn't asked my mom and Scott. And this is because my mother deserves an Oscar for her performance at the Lake Powell trip. So my youngest brother Hunter turned 21 in August. And to celebrate this big milestone, my mom wanted to take him to the Lake Powell. We rented a houseboat for 3 or 4 days, and it was an awesome experience. So Scott's side of the family grew up on a lake. Their family had a lake house for a long period of time. That was the house they lived in when Scott was in high school. Mm-hmm. So every time we went back to visit the grandparents, we were doing lake activities and boating and all sorts of stuff. So that holds a near and dear place to all of our hearts, but especially Scott. And Hunter loves those types of things, so for Hunter's birthday, we thought this would be really fun. Yeah. But unfortunately, you couldn't go because it was the same weekend as your family reunion. Yeah. Plus, it was really expensive to get out there and it required a long period of time, so it did turn out to be a little more economical, but I was bummed you couldn't make it. So anyhow, on this trip, to set some perspective, when my older brother Rob was getting ready to propose to Sarah, my sister-in-law, he asked each of us, okay, give me your full honest opinion. I'm crazy about this woman. I want to marry her. What do you guys think? So it was kind of a reverse asking for our blessing. But if one of us had said, we have some concerns, I know he would have taken that into consideration, seriously thought about that, but I don't necessarily think that would have nixed the whole. Yeah. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just felt like doing a similar thing. So on the Lake Powell trip, I was like, I think this might be happening soon. Here's why. And I told my mom this story, and I had asked everybody in my family, Mom, Scott, Rob, Jeff, Hunter, what do you guys think? Kind of speak now or forever hold your peace. I really
I'm
want...
doing it at the wedding.
Yeah, like, I want your honest opinion, right? If you guys see major red flags and I'm too lovey-dovey-eyed to notice it, still after 4 years of us being together, like, please let me know. So anyhow, I'm telling my mom this story about the phone call with my dad and him kind of spilling the beans. And she's like, well, Will hasn't asked us. And she gets really kind of upset. She's like, does he not like us? Is he intimidated by us? You know, my feelings are hurt. He should know that he can come to us. I can't believe he hasn't asked us. We're just as much parents of you as your father, you know, blah, 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 blah. She's just going on. And I'm like, man, my mom is really hurt about this. Like, she really feels like Will doesn't like her or something. Like, and I'm assuring her, no. Woo. I'm assuring her that he loves you, you know. He's probably just waiting till Thanksgiving at least. That's the next time we're going to be in Colorado. You know, all these things. And she really sold that performance. But at this point in time, you had already asked her.
Yeah.
You'd already had this whole conversation. So, in the back of my mind, talking about the manicures, talking about the treat yourself day, you know, all this stuff, I'm like, but maybe it's not happening, right? I have all these signals saying yes, but still some signals saying no. So I did my hair just in case, but when you mentioned, oh, you're doing your hair, I was like, oh, well, he's kind of on to me. So I made sure to wear kind of a normal outfit that I normally wear every day. And I'm sitting in lab, and of course all my lady friends in lab, I've told, I think this might be happening. And here are all the reasons why. Yeah, and Steph came to me that morning. She's like, so I want to hear, do you think it's going to happen? You know, and I'm like, yeah, I think it is. You know, I did my hair, and she literally goes, and that's what you're wearing? So I liked my outfit. It's fine. I had no problem with it. But it was just really funny that she had a similar feedback as like, you're wearing a very normal everyday outfit for such an occasion, right? And Sophia and Steph actually too was like, should we be hiding in the gardens with our cameras? Like, and I'm like, no.
And take some pictures.
Yeah, I'm like, it's gonna be fine. Like, I don't think we need to go any great lengths. And I, even at that point, I was like, I still have this one major piece of evidence that makes me think today's a normal day.
And I, like, when you woke up and did your hair, I actually thought about, like, waiting until the following morning to ask you. But I was like, at this point, like, diamonds were always on my mind, and like, that was
the other thing. So I noticed that diamonds were on your mind because I found a little clear plastic thing, like something you would set on the bottom of a coaster to keep it up a little bit, or like to slide a little better on the couch, and I picked it up and I had said to you, what is this? And you're like, oh, probably a loose diamond or something. And I remember just being like, what a weird comment. Like, what on earth would he be talking about or thinking about diamonds? Like, so that was like Wednesday, the Wednesday before the Friday treat yourself. So I knew that it was on the brain.
Yeah, it was definitely like on the brain, and something like that was just like, all right, like I was like the 2 days before, like I didn't like get great nights of sleep. Like I woke up.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing. So you woke up really early Thursday morning.
Yeah, and Friday morning.
Well, that's the thing. You woke up really early Thursday morning, and I was like, "Oh, are you feeling okay?" You know, you're like, "Yeah, whatever." And he does this when he's stressed about things. He wakes up early, or doesn't sleep that well throughout the night, but then also wakes up early. So I thought, well, maybe this is residual stress. You know, last week was my defense. We were both stressed about that. We had a big weekend, so we're all exhausted from this great celebratory weekend. But then when you woke up again early Friday morning, I was like, oh, he's definitely got something on his mind. Like, definitely.
So yeah, went to the gardens and proposed, and she said yes. It was a nice little moment for us.
It was.
And
so yeah, that was after the
massage.
We went home, got Amelia. We went to the gardens, had a beautiful stroll through the gardens.
Yeah, kind of.
Very romantic, very sweet. You got down on one knee. Good job.
I was worried I wasn't gonna be able to get up. I'm so old.
Well, and I was like, I felt like it was so awkward at that moment because I was all ready to give you hugs and kisses, and right, you're like on a knee, like holding this thing, right, and made it happen.
Yeah,
It was good.
we definitely made it happen.
Yeah.
And so then we went to dinner that night. And,
We did. Oh, that was the other. I was like, because then I don't have to do my hair tonight. Because I knew we were going to a nice dinner to celebrate my defense.
Yeah. So we went to dinner, steak
Nana
dinner.
steak.
Nana
It was
steak
really
here and
good.
And
I really liked
yeah,
that dinner.
it was a good dinner. And then we went and hung out with some friends that evening.
Party the night away in Raleigh. Yeah. So it was
So
a
it
great
was
time.
a good time.
Yeah.
And then the following week, kind of to end the month of October.
My mom and Scott came
Yeah.
to visit to celebrate, so that was a great time too. They came Friday, and we had, you had gotten us tickets to Countdown to Craziness.
Yes.
So it's one of our last abilities, like for my family, to easily go to see basketball in Cameron Indoor Stadium. So we took full advantage. That was a ton of fun. My parents both really loved that. And then Saturday we went on some walks, got some good brunch, and we had set up another defense celebration, also at Clouds Brewery.
Yeah.
But this one was more, a lot of my lab friends were included, so a lot of people came to both celebrations, but this was also for other people that weren't in the different lab, or other friends, people like Mike and Sue Faulkner and Mitch Faulkner that own the gymnastics gym and coach gymnastics with me, because I've been doing that my entire defense. You know, they saw all the ups and downs as well, and so just all the people that have been instrumental in being my support system and helping me get through this. So that was a really nice time to celebrate with everybody and
It was.
get to talk to everybody.
A lot of people came out and to celebrate.
Yeah, and that really meant a lot to me. So
Dr. Hattie Christine.
thank you everybody who came. And then that night, with Mom and Scott, we went to West End Billiards, and we played shuffleboard way into the early morning hours, and that was so much fun too. So yeah, it was just a great whirlwind weekend. Mom and Scott had to leave early in the afternoon on Sunday.
Yeah.
So we went to brunch. That was nice. And so yeah, and that was just last weekend. So it's just been boom, 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 all the things.
And the month is not over
even
yet.
over
We got Halloween coming next week.
Yeah, this week. So Monday I have this big interview, so I'm leaving on Sunday. So it's just another weekend of like
something
going on. So yeah, it's been an eventful month, but a lot of good things. A lot less stress going on in this household.
True that.
The same amount of love. So I had one other thing I wanted to say that was really important to me. We mentioned during my defense and preparing for my defense and completing my whole dissertation, that involved a lot of stress and sometimes some periods of extreme anxiety. And I was really fortunate to have a lot of services. So not just a great support system like you and my family and the girls at the gymnastics gym, my friends, but also CAPS, the Center for, what does CAPS stand for? Counseling and Psychological Services. Yeah. So I was able to get a lot of support for mental health services, and I think that was crucial to my success, and nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be concerned about or hiding. So I want to put that out there. And
it's interesting that you bring that up, because it definitely, like, it came through my mind like that was definitely a huge part of like the whole defense and like managing the situation. And I didn't know like if you like wanted to bring that up, or if that, like, how did you feel about like having that conversation on this forum? So
yeah, I think it's important because I want to encourage other people that if you feel that you need help, to reach out and get it. There's tons of services available to you, and it can really help.
Yes.
So I think not only is there kind of a stigma about it, but that's not what I'm here to address. I think a lot of people may feel like, oh, that's not going to help me. Yeah. Or
no,
I'm the only one
definitely
suffering
made
with
a
this.
difference.
Yeah.
It definitely
an independent third party can attest.
It made a huge difference.
So I'm really thankful to have those types of opportunities and services, and I just want to encourage anyone that thinks they might benefit from that, or even if they don't think that, they just, what they're trying isn't helping, to try something new and to talk to someone and see what can happen. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
All right.
And so yeah, October was a really busy month for us.
Yes, it was very busy.
And that's what we've been doing.
Deuces.